Okay, peace and greetings, peace and greetings. So, I am Goddess Queen Jamila. I'm a master's candidate. I'm an initiated sacred woman. I have 15 years walking with women in the Black and African diaspora. And this is part one of a series that I've created because I'm building the body of work that wasn't there when I needed it. I wasn't able to find answers easily. And so I am housing my work under one series. Um, Demonizing the Divine Her is a living, scholarly, and spiritual record. Each episode is one piece of a larger argument. And that argument is that Black diasporic women are not discovering something new, that we are remembering something ancient that was deliberately taken, deliberately co opted. So, this series, Demonizing the Divine Her, exists because I went looking for this body of work and found silence. I found things weren't being discussed out in the open. So, we're going to discuss what we're seeing in modern times with Black diasporic women who are reconstituting. And so today we start at the beginning. We start with the gap. Now, this is not any motivational content. This is not self love content. This isn't any of that. This is scholarly content and content that we are developing and working on as we speak, that I am developing and working on as we speak, to create a fantastic living archive of the answers. And I'm going to be talking about why this silence wasn't an accident. So I'm going to start with part one, which is today. If you are joining us today, that means you're right on time because we are starting this new series, and this is part one. And what I want to do first is really talk about, start with my lived experience. I will say that after living on the continent for 6 years, that there is something very sacred about being at the water for me. There's something very sacred um, about cleansing in the water, cleansing at the ocean. And I remember the first time I held ceremony in Tanzania. It was in Zanzibar, and I had literally just came to Zanzibar to hold sacred space for a group of women on a retreat. And when I came on that retreat, I was really um, mesmerized. We were right on the ocean. We were waking up in the morning and being greeted by Yemaya Mami Wata, the deity that nurtures us as mother. And while we were there, we held a ceremony. And not assuming that you are familiar with it, I'll just explain very briefly that we, as Black and Indigenous women, we are so connected to the earth, that once upon a time we held ceremonies, we sat in space with each other, and all the things that we were dealing with emotionally, all the things that we were dealing with spiritually, problems in our home, challenges that we were having in that ceremony, that was a time for us to express ourselves, express our feelings, express all the pent up emotions that had not been given space to come out, things that we might have suppressed because we didn't have anywhere to put it, and oftentimes because we were carrying loads for other people. So, once upon a time, this was our deep and trusted Indigenous practice, and we would gather in a circle, monthly to do so. So, part of my work is reconstituting these Indigenous practices. And so, I led a ceremony with my retreat attendees, as I normally do, in Zanzibar. And um, we started off in the house. We were inside of a beautiful villa, amazing 2-story villa with everything. The villa was beautiful and gorgeous. But when we started the ceremony, we had built an altar to venerate our ancestors inside of a particular sacred space. And I knew that being inside for the ceremony wouldn't be enough. It would not be enough for us because we were really doing deep work. At that time, I was leading a 14-day retreat. So I gathered up the ladies who were there, the sisters who were all there, and we traveled outside of the house and we went into the courtyard. And when we went into the courtyard, as soon as we stepped out, the moon was just there. The moon was there, beaming, shining like the sun, shining like the sun on top of us. And it was such an elegant and mystical and magical experience to just have this time outside in Africa in the dark, moon and us. And so we stayed there for some time, but then I drew the ladies down to the ocean. And I had brought um, a few of them, down as close as we could without actually like touching the water. And from there, I just started to ring my bell. Okay, I started to ring my bell and I started to shout for a deep water deity. The name of that deity is Olokun. I just started to shout the name of Olokun. I started speaking to the ocean. I started speaking to Yemaya. I spoke to the elements of water and I shook that bell. And as that bell rang and rang and rang and rang, that was the moment that it felt like all of the pieces of this reconstitution had connected for me, from my spirit to to my divine body to the land. Like all of these things are essentially one. All is one. And that is what I am going to be digging deeper in, not only this series, but in my dissertation as I move forward in my studies. And that really solidified all of the things that I'm going to share with you starting from today. So we're going to be doing this monthly series just once a month, and we're going to be doing it. I'll be doing it on YouTube. Feel free to share with people that you know. Feel free to invite others, and feel free to join my WhatsApp group if you want to be in the know, or even follow me on Instagram in order to find out when the next one is. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's start by talking about Black women as Indigenous women. Um, sorry, hold on. Let's start by talking about Black women as Indigenous women. So we talk about Black women as Indigenous women, and that's something that not everyone has grown up understanding. Everyone has not grown up understanding Black women to be Indigenous women. And what do I mean when I say Indigenous? Indigenous means that we are the original mothers of civilization. Black women, as we know, Black women across the world are the first iteration of woman in this world, on this planet. We are the first woman. Okay, if there is a story about Adam and Eve, then we are the Eve. Okay, we are the primordial mothers, primordial aunties, the original grandmothers. We are the first women of civilization. That makes us the mothers of human civilization. And it's important to start with that because very often there are debates and conversations about Indigenous. When you start talking about Indigenous, there are levels to indigeneity. You have Indigenous peoples who are um, relevant to particular geographical locations and different parts of the earth. When I speak about Indigenous, I'm speaking about all, overall, okay? And so Black women are the Indigenous woman of this earth, of this planet Earth. And in terms of my positionality when it comes to spirit in the Black woman, I identify the Black woman as God, goddess. Okay. When we start looking at original religions, original spiritual ordinances in this world, we can take it back to the beginning. And in the beginning, we have found through texts like the Great Cosmic Mother, and When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone, we have found that the original societies and the original civilizations of the world held space for women as high divine spirit. So they worshiped, in essence, the goddess originally, worshiped the divine feminine. And there's three primary reasons why the feminine was exalted as God goddess in the beginning. Um, the first reason is because in the original civilizations, the divine intuitive and also very closely linked to the Most High, to the I and I, to all that exists. And so this spiritual linkage, in addition to high levels of intuition, and bleeding, this time of cleansing, this time of high level energy charge, all of this fed into the understanding that this woman is drastically different from men. So automatically building a case in early civilizations for women to be regarded as God goddess. One of the second things that I want you to know about this phenomenon and being regarded and heralded as God goddess is that women were the healers. In the original civilizations, women were the healers. I just want to make sure you all can hear me. Can you hear me? Testing one, two. Let me just. Okay, okay, perfect. I'm seeing hearts. Okay, so just making sure you can hear me. So, yes, also in the during this time, okay, give thanks. Thank you so much, sis. So also during this time, we find that um so the first piece of it is, yes, the cycle. The cycle is a charged time, it's a spiritual time, and people looked at the woman and saw that she possesses these gifts, and she's bleeding, but she's not dying, she's not injured, she's not hurt, and this takes place every single month. And oftentimes those things cycled up with the moon. Although I do want to give a small caveat and also acknowledge to you that this bleeding was not done across the board for Black women, and that Black women started to bleed much later. That there was a time that existed for us where we didn't have periods at all, and that a lot of the heavy periods that you see of today, in addition to the damage that comes with periods and the sickness aspect of it, came after colonization. So I just want to point that out. But one factor was that time of the month and our ability to have and harness those gifts during that time. Another thing that was very relevant is that the woman was the healer. And so the woman being the healer means that this is the person who, when someone is sick, when someone is on their deathbed, when someone is in need of care or um, recovery, that the person who would then be able to heal that person, who would be able to make them whole, if any person, would be the women. The women were in the possession of the medicine, able to really identify herbs, able to administer herbs and care for those who needed that additional help in their time of sickness and in their time of need. So that's the second point to be made. A third point to be made is that the woman was the bearer of children, of human life, that this entity was the one vessel that could be normal one day, and then 9 months later a human being would emerge from her. And in these early civilizations, without conversations about, sperm and eggs and ovaries and estrogen and everything else, this phenomenon positioned women to be worshiped as God, goddess. This is what elevated women in society, what gave them roles and positions in society, and what really made them worth protecting. You protect the God, goddess. You protect your most valuable assets. There was a news article that I read years ago that talked about, if you want to conquer a society, anytime people are looking to conquer a particular society, that they start with the women, because the women are the most valuable member between males and females in any given society or group or civilization. So those reasons really led the woman to be elevated in society as God, goddess. And because of that, she was exalted in many ways. There were temples that were built to honor God, goddess. When you come to the feet of God, goddess, you bring gifts, you bring offerings, you bring things that show, this is how I honor you, this is how I acknowledge your presence, and this is how I ask you for gifts. And so all of these things made a fundamental difference in Black women being established as first goddess in this civilization. As a matter of fact, the oldest goddess that we know of and that we have traced is dated to Kemetic society. And this goddess is called Auset. Auset or Iset can be traced to Kemetic civilization, and is part of um, a legion of goddesses that hold and exhibit high levels of spiritual power. And with Auset, Iset, this goddess mirrors, I would say, some other goddesses in the West African culture as well. There are other goddesses in West African culture, and those goddesses might be familiar to you. You might have heard of the goddess Oshun. You might have heard of the goddess Yemaya. You might have heard of the goddess Oya. You might heard of the goddess Age, who is the goddess of prosperity and wealth. So there are a number of different goddesses that were represented in the beginning, in our first and early civilizations, that were represented by the divine feminine. Okay, so this is a big reason why I have named this series Demonizing the Divine Her, because in order for you to snatch away the power of the divine her, you would have to find a way to manipulate and to demonize and to reduce the power, to reduce the effects, to reduce the impact of the divine her. So, in my own journey, when I started to look for answers. I had started my spiritual awakening very early, around the age of 17, 18. And when I started my spiritual awakening during that time, I was really in a very uncompromising position. I was a pregnant teenager and I had just been introduced to Sacred Woman. But the bigger issue with me and Sacred Woman was the fact that I didn't have anybody around me at 17, 18 who could really understand what I was experiencing in my spiritual awakening. So, every time that you are cast into a new level, if you are unable to get answers, if you're unable to find your way at that new level, you will not be able to sustain it. So what ended up happening was I ended up going back to sleep. I was awakened. I came into that space of awakening, and then I ended up going back to sleep. So that was as a teenager. And so I stayed asleep for a very long time. The next time I encountered awakening again was at the age of 30. And at that time, I'd had two children. I had gotten married. I was living in Atlanta. And I had gone on a journey that I didn't know was going to lead to awakening. I had actually gone on a journey to lose weight. At the time, at 30 years old or 29 years old, I was about 225 pounds. I was very overweight. I was eating things that were damaging to my body. And I was in a very, terrible work position. I was working as a teacher. My previous role was as a teacher, but I was working for the Department of Juvenile Justice, which is where they lock up children. And so, that was a very high stress environment. I was really under a lot of pressure. I had a lot of, things weighing down on me, literally and physically, emotionally as well. All that stuff had just piled up on top of me. And I decided after watching a documentary, Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, that I was going to juice. I was going to drink green juice, and I was going to do so for an extended period of time until I can get my body back on track. And so that's what I did. So I started juicing, and through juicing, I lost a significant amount of weight. I lost about 80 pounds through juicing. And even though I had gained this new quality of life in my body, I was feeling good. I was looking good. What I didn't know was that by ingesting fruits and vegetables for 120 days straight, that this would also affect my subconscious, that this would put me into a new dimension with my spiritual journey. I didn't even know anything about the subconscious. I didn't know anything about the spiritual journey prior to that 120-day juicing that I did. And I didn't even know that this was really considered to be fasting. And this is how priestesses, how monks, how higher level master teachers, how they're able to move from one stage to another. So it was a lot of learning at that point for me about spirit. I was able to tap into another dimension really quickly and see auras, see people, see things that I had not expected to see. So for me, just transitioning through that journey of awakening at 30, it was like I had been, again, catapult into this awakening, and I had to figure out, how do I navigate this? And a big thing that I pride myself on is really digging deep into the roots. I'm a root person. I'm a deep, thinker, and I like to go deep in understanding. So I started to look for information to really understand what was going on with me, what was happening, and who am I, more importantly, and why am I here? There were so many questions that I had. So at that age of 30, I started to look up and research and dive deeper. And I took my life coach certification, and I started to learn about spirituality and how we level up and the levels of consciousness, and how we go from one stage to another. And everything that I learned, I started to teach. I started to create my company, freethefeminine.com. I started to create circles, sister circles, goddess circles. I started to create these types of environments so that other people could also benefit from what I was learning. Now, one thing that I did that I think is absolutely fantastic is I started to align myself with other women who were also in the spiritual field, in the spiritual realm. And a few of these women, you may or may not have ever heard about, but there was one particular mastermind that I arranged. I just gathered some women together who were in the spiritual field. And I said, let's really dig deep and let's work on some part of our craft, work on some part of our offering, and really take ourselves from one level to another level. And so there were about 4 or 5 of us in one particular mastermind that I had organized. And we were meeting weekly to discuss what we were working on and how things were going. And One of my friends, Leora, she had invited her friend, Abiola Abrams, and then I had invited another one of my friends. Her name was Gigi, and she did spirituality when it comes to astrology. So we were all in this cohort together and really supporting one another and etc. And I was still on this journey of fact finding and digging deep and learning more. And I had just come into understanding what I explained earlier about the goddesses, about these goddesses that exist in the eastern region of Africa, which was the Kemetic side, the Nubian side, what is known as present day Egypt, and also the West African deities, these feminine deities that I had not grown up learning. I had not grown up learning about Ma'at and how Ma'at is the deity of equality and justice and equilibrium. I had not grown up learning about that. I had grown up learning about the significance of Africa, but not about these specific deities. So I was peeling back all this information piece by piece myself. There was no courses, there was no classes, there was no workshops, there was no seminars that I could enroll into where I could learn this information, because this information was my information. This was mine. This was something that belonged to me. This was something that I needed to learn. This was relevant to me as a divine feminine, as a mother of civilization. And in me peeling back all this information, the more I peel back, the more I read, with every page that I turned, the angrier I got. The angrier I got. You might be asking, why were you angry? Do y'all know why I'm angry? Why was I getting angry? Okay, because here I am, I'm discovering all this information. Excuse me, I'm just gonna plug my phone in before it dies because I am sitting on 1%. So you might be asking, why were you angry, right? And I don't know if there's anybody who knows why I'm angry. I don't see any comments from you all, but I will tell you that the reason I was angry, and I'm just going to share this again. I forgot to share it in my group. So the reason I was angry is because it became clear after a while that people had hid this information. Like this information was hidden because it took me a significant amount of time to find it. It took a lot of effort to find the information, and really to was I even supposed to know what I was looking for in the first place? Like, none of it seemed fair. 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 The fact that I have to look for this information, even though I didn't know what I was looking for, and go on this particular journey to find information about my spirituality, not my religiosity. Not my religiosity. We're going to talk about religiosity in the next video. But I had to do so much work just to find the truths about my spirituality. And by the time I started to discover more and more and more, I realized I am angry. Because why did they hide this from us? Why was this hidden? Why isn't this available? Why wasn't this on Front Street? Why wasn't this something that I could readily access? Why? 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 I was infuriated, completely and totally infuriated. And what added insult to injury was the fact that there was no place for me to really talk about that. There was no place for me to really discuss spirituality. There was no place for me to discuss what I was learning about the Black feminine and about the deities and about these spiritual powers that we held, and this magic and this divinity and this greatness that we were in possession of. There was no place. Where do you go talk about that? Do you go talk about that to your mother? Do you go talk about that to your sister? Do you go talk about that to your neighbor? There was no place to have this discussion. There was no place. And I mean, for us, that's a very big deal because we're the type of people, we want to talk about this. We watch a movie, we want to talk about the movie. We watch a show, we want to talk to other people about the show. So going on this spiritual journey and not having anyone to discuss with it, it really just had me all over the place. And I was very angry. And what I did was I brought that into the mastermind. At first, I wasn't even going to, come on that day. I wasn't going to come on. It was a particular day. We had it scheduled and I had just discovered more things. And I logged in and the sister Abiola showed up. Leora showed up and we were there. They were sharing about their, where they were. And it got my turn. And when it got my turn, I just simply started to talk. But as I spoke, the rage spoke on my behalf. And before I knew it, I was shouting, I was crying. There was snot bubbles coming from my face. I was spitting. I was foaming at the mouth and talking about how these things belong to us. These are ours and we're supposed to have them. All of this, these tools, it's like a tool chest. It's a treasure chest that was left behind for us by our foremothers, by our Black, divine, cosmic, feminine foremothers. And we haven't access to those tools because we haven't known that those tools existed. So I was so angry, pissed. And the other ladies, they sat there, they looked at me, they were kind of stunned, not really knowing what to say. They met my response with kindness. Abiola encouraged me and said, this is why you're doing this now, etc. But I was so upset at that time. So upset. And one of the most beautiful things that came after that, out of that, was Abiola's objective. She was writing a book, I think, on that time about breathwork or maybe EFT. All of a sudden, she switched courses after that. And she started to receive downloads. And those downloads were what she used to make the text African Goddess Initiation, which was published by Hay House. And she was able to sit with all the deities. This is literally African goddesses that were coming through her one by one so that she could write that text and give birth to that text. And I'm 100% sure that me crying out from the depths of my soul the way that I did had a direct impact on whatever her spirit was able to hear and receive, and the way that 16-wheeler turned around to be able to then deliver it, not just on my behalf, but on behalf of all the women who are seeking. Because again, I started out in the beginning of this particular this first video in telling you all that I am all about creating the bodies of work, inspiring bodies of work that weren't there when I needed it. So that felt like a win, right? But the fact that it wasn't there in the first place, that if I wanted that information at that age, at 30, when I was entering into that realm, the fact that it wasn't there at that time was very intentional, very purposeful, and it was a lot. It was a lot. So this is what I call the gap. This is what I call the gap. It is the space where scholarship is not forthcoming. It's not front street. You got to pull it back. You got to tiptoe. You got to come in and open the door in the back. There's a lot of things that you have to do just to find yourself with scholarship. And this is what I'm here to remind you that holds the keys to our power as the divine feminine, because this suppression has disempowered us. The suppression of these powers, the suppression of these tools, the suppression of these deities, the suppression of this presence, the suppression of this knowledge, of the wisdom. It has perpetually disempowered us. And this is intentional on the part of the colonizer. This is intentional on the part of those who seek to institutionalize us. It's intentional. It's not an accident. It's not something that was just, oh, look, we skipped it over. Not only have our deities been suppressed, but what they did was they took what they wanted. They took Iset and they renamed her Isis in Greece. And they made her into a Greek god. That's how phenomenal she was, that they became wildly obsessed with Isis. But even in the beginning, the question is, what did African feminine sacred authority look like before colonial Christianity renamed it and reordered it? One of the things that is very significant is that what this this story, this maternal story of baby Jesus, you know, the Virgin Mary, Mother Mary, baby Jesus, right? This Christian story is not original to Christianity. Before that, there was the Dark Mother, and the Dark Mother was Isis. Okay? The Dark Mother was Isis. And there are statues um, of Isis with baby Horus on her lap. That's the original mother story. And that's the Dark Mother. That is originated on the continent. That's continental. It's not a Jesus in the swaddling cloth. It doesn't have those origins. So before colonial Christianity renamed and reordered it, it was rooted in us. It was rooted in, again, the mother of civilization. If you ever hear anyone saying mother of civilization, you absolutely have to know that this is a coined term by goddess Queen Jamila Orset. That goddess Queen Jamila Orset is going to ring the gong continuously about mother of civilization. So when we talk about before, we're talking about the original. I didn't start you out with what existed in modern day. I didn't even start you out with what existed post-slavery or during slave times. Our history did not start with slavery. Our history started as the indigenous woman, as the mother of civilization. And from there, we have expanded out into deities, into divine feminine ordinances, into um, let me just call it proof, existence that there is a symbiotic relationship with the Black woman and the Most High. Even our womb is a site of sacred honor. Okay, so there's so many things that we can look to and point to as evidence of our divinity, of this holy that we possess within us that has never been expressed to us. When we start talking about the next part, where we're gonna really speak about Christianity specifically and the effects that Christianity has had on the consciousness of the Black woman, because it's not just about religiosity. It's about spirituality. And I often purport that as spiritual beings, we don't need the systems of religion. Okay? We don't need the systems of religion. Religion has, and specifically Christianity, has had 10 commandments. We started in the beginning with 42 laws of Ma'at. We had 42 laws. We we didn't need 10 commandments because we were understanding how to be in symbiosis, how to relate with one another, how to be in Ubuntu, how to be in community, how to be in harmony, Ma'at, justice, Ma'at. So there's so many things that we're gonna explore in this monthly series, and we're gonna go on and talk about, like I said, Christianity. And Christianity, not because I'm picking on Jesus the Christ, but because Christianity is one of the systems, one of the religious institutions that has had the most harm, psychological harm, social harm, emotional harm, community harm, when it comes to the Black woman. I am speaking about the Black woman in the diaspora. So this is a very, very, very important topic for us to discuss. But even when when you hear people, and I want to, really kind of arm you with this information, because oftentimes when we do talk about Christianity, one of the first things people say is, well, Christianity existed in Africa, um, prior to it existing in other parts of the world. Like, basically, like, the continent had Christianity first as well. And that is true and not true. So, what people are speaking about is, in Ethiopia, what existed was a very high level of Orthodox Judaism. And that Orthodox Judaism that existed is completely different from what emerged into Christianity, and then was used as a system to co-opt people in colonialism. We are decolonizing our understanding of these religious systems. And when it comes to Christianity, the Christianity that we know has become a co-opted institution with other goals, with other intentions attached to it. And these intentions have never been to benefit people of color. These intentions have never been to benefit Black bodies, Black minds, brown people. That was never the intention of these systems. And there's even a person who quoted, I don't remember, and I apologize just putting that out there, but this person said that um, if the Christian system had as much power in it as they taught those who they infiltrated, then they would have never given it to the slaves in the first place. They would have never given it to us in the first place if it was all powerful and all able to elevate. If all of these things were true, they would not have given it to their enemy. They would not have given it to the people that they sought to oppress. Okay, so yes, Dark Mother in Ethiopia, Osset, was stolen. So they co-opted the system of religiosity from Ethiopia and took principles from that. They stole a whole deity. What we know as Osset, she's known as Isis in Greek civilization, and there has been a complete disruption, complete um, disruption of our relationship with the divine feminine. And also, there's a lack of acknowledgement to any feminine presence when it comes to religion. Religion doesn't hold feminine presence. Religion doesn't hold feminine presence. And this is what makes it dangerous as well, because when you look at these original spiritual technologies and spiritual ordinances on the continent, they are all inclusive. You have, your Yemaya, and you also have Olokun, right? Yemaya is the mother of the waters, Mami Wata, and Olokun is the father of the water. But the difference is that Olokun sits at the very bottom of the ocean, so he offers you depth. He offers you depth. Olokun offers you protection. Olokun is a deity that exists without fear because he's at the bottom of the ocean and there's no sun down there. There's no sun. He sits amongst the sharks. Olokun is the whale. Okay, so in these African traditions, in these indigenous traditions, we see that there are both feminine and masculine entities, which again represents balance. It represents balance, ma'at, balance, once again. So understanding who we are, understanding us as indigenous people means that you understand that we are well-rounded people. We need both sides of the coin. We cannot exist in just one element. We can't exist with just one lane, right? And so in my journey, I have had to uncover these things. And today I'm just speaking about the gaps that exist. That's all today is about. What are the gaps that exist? What was the information that wasn't there? What wasn't present? How did I come into all of this? So in the next in the next chapter, in the next video, I'm going to be talking to you about Christianity and colonialism and the language, the practices. Some things are going to be absolutely mind-blowing. When I tell you all about the origins of Catholicism, when I tell you all about some of these things, it's going to be mind-blowing. And I'm telling you about this theology because I want you to understand how they have demonized the divine the divine her while also co-opting, while also stealing, while also forging, while also extracting. They say that the devil has come to kill, steal, and destroy. The only body of people I've known to continuously do that are the colonizers. The colonizer has inflicted such damage on us as mother of civilization that this damage has perpetuated for hundreds of thousands of years. But we are in a space and in a time where all that was done in the dark is coming up to the light. And the next video is called White as Snow and the War on the Black Body. So we're going to be discussing colonialism and Christian theology. And then from there, we're also going to talk about the body and embodiment and how they have, really exacted a lot of war on the body. But all of this is just a foundation. Let me, be very frank. This is just the first part. This is part one. After we go through part one with what's happened in the past, we're going to talk about part two. And part two is how we have traversed through that, right? So again, I'm a scholar. So my body of work is centered around researching these things. I'm a master's student in women's spirituality. So specifically, I'll be talking about Black women and spirituality, and specifically the diaspora. So part two is going to be about how we have traversed through it and even thrived in spite of it. And then part three is going to be about the return, really going back through the Middle Passage and reconstituting all the things that were lost and how we're even doing that in this day and time. So I hope that this served you. If this did serve you, please give me a thumbs up. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you like. Feel free to share the video. And let me just take a look at the calendar so I can let you know. If you have not already, subscribe and hit the notification so that you can be aware of when I am on live. Because I know sometimes it's like, I can't remember the next day you're going to be back, but you won't have to remember if you hit like and subscribe and you hit the notifications. And so the next time I'll be doing, the next video, the next live video will be next month. And it's always the third Saturday of the month, which is not easy to remember, but it's also next month is the new moon. Give thanks, give thanks. Are you in our group, sis? Oh, okay. Before I get distracted, April 18th, just making sure everybody's in the group because it says your screen name, but I don't know who I'm talking to yet. So, April 18th, Saturday, same time, I will be back online to do video number 2. I'm going to do it once a month. That's all I can commit to in the midst of thesis planning and PhD applications and everything else. But I'm very excited because I am really looking forward to being able to go through this process with you and articulate every single piece, every single chapter. It's high time that we really understood not just the elements of who we are, but what was stolen and really why it was stolen and what was happening. Peace and greetings, sis. And what is happening currently for us to get back on track and to reconstitute. And I say reconstitute and not reclaim because reclamation indicates that something was taken and you had to go and get it back. That's a reclamation. And that's what I thought was happening before. But now that I understand that there is a fundamental relationship between 3 entities, the body, the spirit, and the land, right? So, because right now what we're seeing is Black women are not just, finding the deities and finding these levels of African traditions and African spirituality and plant medicine technology. We're not just doing that, but we're also leaving in from these Western places and finding our way to different pieces of land. And that the land is also connected to the body, and the body is connected to the spirit. So it's almost like these 3 things, they were never 3, they were always one. And I am going to show you more about that in this series. So I really appreciate you showing up today. Again, I'm Goddess Queen Jamila, and I will see you back here. Just subscribe and hit notifications, but I will see you back here April the 18th, same time. All right. Take care. Peace.